Welcome back. The ANC, which was once a symbol of unity and resistance against apartheid, has been plagued by internal division and corruption. As a result, its popularity has significantly declined. In an attempt to revive the party and regain public trust, the ANC has proposed a unity plan that aims to address these divisions and strengthen its position. However, opposition parties remain unconvinced and deep-rooted divisions persist. We are joined this evening by Dr. Radu Naidu, a political analyst from South Africa, who will discuss the ongoing talks between the South African opposition parties regarding the ANC's unity plan. Dr. Naidu will share his insight on the current state of these talks and the implications for South Africa's political landscape. Doctor, good evening and thank you so much for joining us here on the Daily Roundup. Welcome. Doctor, I'm unable to hear you. There you are.
Okay, I'm here. Good evening, Nina. Thanks. Great to be with you guys tonight.
Thank you so much for joining us. Of course, Doctor, we have been watching the news last week and over the weekend, and what has transpired since the ANC has made a press statement saying that they will be going into coalition talks is that the DA has flat out said that they're not interested in, from what I understand, the EFF as well. So what do you believe will be the challenges for the ANC? What challenges will they be facing in trying to form this government of national unity?
Nina, I think the big issue here is that none of the parties expected the result that they got. So it's a question of saying, how do we make the best of a bad situation? And the skepticism that the other parties are demonstrating right now, I think, is more the initial posturing. Should that government of national unity come into play, how the spoils are divided and how they would divide the power. So the question really is, there is, in a government of national unity, there is no space for one party leading the coalition and getting its power back. And the other parties are concerned, in a government of national unity, the ANC still remains the leading party, the leading partner in such a government. And how effective would they be in terms of their agenda, for example, on the far right and the far left of things like land reform, nationalization, BEE, all the big things that have been part of the landscape for the last 30 some odd years. So I think it's really a situation of posturing. And before they get down to the actual talks of what would this look like, it's something new in this country. It's not like the government of national unity in 1994. That was a very completely different animal. So we're going into fairly new waters here. And I think it's just, for the moment, it's just posturing to make the view felt before the serious talks begin.
How do you think these recent election results reflect the changing political landscape in South Africa, Doctor? And what do you see as the key drivers of the shift?
I think for the ANC, the big surprise was MK. And MK's claim to his victory is simply that its call is that we reclaim the ANC for ourselves. So I think they cannibalized the ANC. A lot of people who would have voted the ANC voted for MK instead, to bring back that notion of what the ANC stood for. And so that was not the best result for the ANC, because it's now divided. In fact, if you look at the EFF, MK, and the ANC, they're all splintered from the ANC. And now what we in this country are saying, listen, the only way to shift the power in this country in terms of making it democratic and more civil society orientated is to split the big parties so that we have a kind of balance of power. And so what's happening right now in the landscape is that shift has happened. The question in most people's mind is, how would the ANC choose its alliance partners in a coalition? Will it go back to the splinter groups, or heaven forbid, and this is the big right now, do we get into bed with the DA, which seems to be many people to be a logical choice in terms of the way the ANC has shifted from center-left towards the center.
As you mentioned, the MK really surprised a lot of people. How do you see the MK party's, success in the elections impacting the political landscape, particularly given their opposition to Ramaphosa and their potential role in a future government?
I think this is the point that everyone's talking about right now. I think, we went to many election rallies, and the notion was that MK, I think, also was fairly surprised by the result. of such a big showing, and their notion of right now is, so now that we have this power, the elected have spoken, how do we govern? And who will do this? And so they, at the moment when they got the result, they didn't even have a presidential candidate or who would lead the province. They didn't have that in place, so they're scrambling to get that done. And I think what it will cause is a natural shift, as we see throughout the world, into two major blocks, the left and the right. And the ANC doesn't really have a choice except move towards the center. And so the DA, I think there'll be a movement of these two parties towards a place where they can work together. Mm-hmm. And the MK will splinter off probably with the EFF to be the far left. And then we'd have these two big powers. And then, of course, the smaller parties can become the kingmakers in such a situation.
Doctor, what do you believe are the key issues that the ANC and its potential coalition partners will need to address in order to form a stable government? And how do you see these issues being resolved?
Nina, this is really a difficult issue because we're in uncharted waters here regarding. There's some things that are so, where the parties are so far apart, like the issues of nationalization, land reform, affirmative action, and things like that. And finding a way through it would be the single biggest challenge, which means that none of the parties could actually say this is non-negotiable. There has to be a space where we can start to have a different kind of conversation. And my hope is that this kind of government of national unity, because we're not at war with anyone, it's not saying let's come together to do something. The ANC very cleverly brought this notion of we are saying we need to heal the nation right and bring us together. And very few people in the country can disagree with the idea of national unity. But when they get to the table to talk about, I do not think it's possible for them to get through this unless they are talking really seriously to the electorate. And here I'm talking about civil society groupings, which up to now, in the last 10 years, have been extremely weakened by the situation. So it's a chance to again create what I think is a kind of social compact to save the country and build this nation again. I think that if we are big enough to begin to see that, and we really, the ANC says, listen, this means that we're willing to give up things in the sake of the country, and all parties can start to do the same thing, then we have a possibility with the voice of civil society being center stage, not being sidelined, not being used by anyone else. And so I think it's a chance for the country, if this government of national unity should come into force, for it to completely realign the political landscape and even re-energize ordinary citizens about what it is to work for this country and not just for narrow political interests.
Dr. Naidu, I also want to gauge your thoughts on what you believe would be the long-term implications of the ANC's loss of its parliamentary majority for the party's future and for South Africa's political landscape.
Yeah, I think for the ANC, and we see this pattern throughout the world with liberation movements, the general lifespan is between 20 and 30 years. So the ANC has done that. It can no longer use the clarion call of we liberated you, so you owe us. And so that's over. And the ANC, I think, is very well aware of what the implications of that are. So this is an opportunity to still be in power and to reassess its position. And the only way to do this is to start, if a government of national unity is successful and people are beginning to see the change, the ANC will still be seen as the leader of government of national unity. And so they have a great chance, should that split up at some stage, to mobilize a new layer of support in the country. So the landscape will change quite dramatically, and I think for the better in this space, but getting to the point where governance and issues of morals and ethics and values and principles become the norm, rather than simply alignment, shifting blocks of power, trying to get what I want, individual gain versus the universal gain. I think these things are things that we're just seeing the big picture now. But for a government of national unity to be formed, the framework for such a government is absolutely crucial to its success, and the fact that we as civil society are very vigilant watchdogs to what that means to us. I think that's key to this. It brings back the voice of the people in a very, very profound and powerful way, sorry.
Well, Dr. Naidu, it is a crunch time. The parties are under pressure to conclude, negotiations and reach an agreement by June 16th, as South Africa's constitution requires them to do so within 14 days after the declaration of election results. Given the time frame and the little time that is left, do you foresee that these deliberations will end fruitfully?
Yeah, I think it will. We don't really have a choice. The deadline is very clear. The posturing will stop. They have to have serious talks. I know both the ANC and DA have got teams working on this. It'll be some very hard conversations, but they have to come up with something, even if it's a working interim agreement to satisfy the constitution, so that the country feels in this present time of uncertainty that we can see a road to the future, that at least people are talking about it. So it will happen. Whether it will be the best solution, that remains to be seen.
Dr. Naidu, I thank you so much for joining us this evening and for your time. Thank you for being here with us on the Daily Roundup.
Pleasure, Nina. Thank you very much. Bye.
That was Dr. Naidu, South African political analyst, speaking to us about South Africans' ongoing coalition plans currently underway at the moment. We remain to see what will happen. As I did mention, that it is crunch time for the South Africans and that they have to come to a conclusion by June 16th, which is just a few days away. We'll